Inside Angola Prison, America's deadliest penitentiary. For nearly 2 centuries, this land has swallowed men and rarely given them back. The gates rise out of sugarcane fields, the river curves like a moat, and beyond the fences sits a place many who enter will never leave. This is Angola Prison. And before the day is over, you'll understand why so many call it a prison built to erase people. What happens inside these fences doesn't begin with violence. It begins with silence. A silence so heavy it tells new arrivals something no guard ever says out loud: survival here is not guaranteed. And what happens later is even worse. Angola sits on 18,000 acres of former plantation land, bordered on 3 sides by the Mississippi River. It is the largest maximum security prison in the United States, both in size and in reputation. Over 5,000 men live here. The overwhelming majority will die here. But Angola isn't feared just because of its numbers or its isolation. It's feared because of what history built, what violence sustained, and what power still controls daily life inside. And to understand how Angola became what it is today, you have to go back to what this land was before it was ever called a prison. Before it was a penitentiary, Angola was a slave plantation. Enslaved Africans were forced to work this land under constant threat of punishment, overseen by armed guards, cut off from the outside world by the river itself. When slavery ended, the system didn't disappear. It evolved. Louisiana turned this land into a prison farm. The labor stayed the same. The control stayed the same. Only the language changed. Men replaced chains with inmate numbers, but the power structure remained untouched. Even today, Angola functions as a working farm. Prisoners wake before sunrise to tend crops, raise livestock, and maintain the land. The labor is relentless. The heat is unforgiving. And refusal carries consequences that can quietly destroy a man's life inside. A typical day at Angola begins early. Long before the sun clears the horizon, the sound of metal doors and shouted counts echo through cell blocks. Inmates stand beside their bunks as guards confirm bodies and numbers. Every movement is measured. Every delay is noted. Breakfast is brief. Often cold. Sometimes skipped if something goes wrong. Then come the work assignments. For many, it's the fields. They march out in rows, wearing identical clothes, watched from horseback or towers. The heat in Louisiana doesn't ease up just because a man is incarcerated. By mid-morning, sweat soaks through uniforms. By noon, exhaustion sets in. And by afternoon, mistakes happen. What happens to men who make mistakes here is something Angola rarely advertises. But everyone inside knows. Punishment at Angola isn't always loud. Sometimes it's isolation. Sometimes it's losing privileges that make life barely tolerable. Sometimes it's being reassigned to the most brutal labor detail. And sometimes, it's being placed somewhere other inmates call the dungeon, unofficial spaces where time stretches and the mind begins to break. But official discipline is only part of the danger. The real threat comes from the unofficial systems that control Angola from the inside. Angola operates under layers of power. Guards enforce the rules on paper. But inside the housing units, influence belongs to those who can command respect, fear, or loyalty. Some inmates have been here for decades. Life sentences. Multiple life sentences. Men with nothing to lose. Over time, they learn the rhythms of the prison, the blind spots in surveillance, the personalities of officers, and the weaknesses of other inmates. New arrivals learn quickly that survival depends on reading these power dynamics correctly. Who controls this dorm? Who decides who gets protection? Who decides who gets targeted? Choosing wrong can cost you everything. Angola is notorious for inmate-on-inmate violence. Not because it's constant chaos, but because it's calculated. Violence here often comes suddenly, without warning, and with final consequences. Many of the men incarcerated at Angola are serving time for murder. Some have committed acts of violence so extreme they reshaped entire families and communities. When those men are confined together, inside a closed ecosystem with limited oversight, a new code emerges. A code where respect is currency. A code where weakness is punished. A code where silence can mean survival. And if you think guards always intervene, think again. Angola has long struggled with staffing shortages. Officers are responsible for watching dozens, sometimes hundreds, of inmates at once. In some areas, the prison relies on inmate trustees to help maintain order, a practice that blurs the line between authority and survival. Trustees often receive better living conditions, extra food, slight freedoms. In exchange, they help control other prisoners. It's an arrangement that creates loyalty to the system, but resentment among those who are ruled by it. This internal hierarchy keeps violence both contained and invisible. Many incidents never reach official reports. They are handled internally, quietly, by the people who truly run the tiers. And for those who end up at the bottom of this hierarchy, Angola becomes a place where every day feels like borrowed time. Nights at Angola are not peaceful. Even when the lights dim, tension remains. Men sleep lightly, alert to movement, sounds, and shifts in the room. Some wedge shoes under bunks. Others sleep fully dressed. A few never sleep deeply at all. Because at Angola, danger doesn't announce itself. It arrives when you least expect it. And what makes this even more unsettling is that for many inmates, there is no release date. No countdown. No future outside these fences. Angola holds one of the largest populations of inmates serving life without parole in the country. Imagine waking up every day knowing this place is where your story ends. What does that do to a man? Angola has its own cemetery. Hundreds of inmates are buried here. Some with names. Many with numbers. When a man dies inside, whether from illness, age, or violence, he doesn't go home. He becomes part of the land. That knowledge shapes behavior. It hardens some, breaks others, and pushes a few into acts that make Angola's reputation even darker. But Angola isn't only about brutality. That's what makes it complicated. Over the years, the prison has attempted reforms. Educational programs. Faith-based initiatives. Limited vocational training. These efforts exist alongside violence, not in place of it. Hope, at Angola, is allowed, but only in controlled doses. Religion plays a significant role here. For some inmates, faith becomes a shield against despair. For others, it's a way to find structure in a world designed to strip it away. Sunday services fill the chapel. Voices rise in song. For a brief moment, Angola doesn't feel like the deadliest penitentiary in America. It feels almost human. But when the service ends, reality returns. Because outside that chapel door, the same rules apply. The same hierarchies. The same dangers. And in some corners of the prison, faith offers no protection at all. Solitary confinement at Angola has a reputation of its own. Men placed there can spend 23 hours a day alone. No meaningful contact. Minimal light. Limited stimulation. Weeks turn into months. Months into years. The psychological toll is severe. Some inmates beg to return to general population despite the risks. Others retreat inward, losing touch with time, memory, and even their own identity. And yet, solitary is often presented as a solution. A way to control violence rather than confront the systems that produce it. But Angola's most disturbing truths don't live in any single cell block. They live in the stories inmates tell each other in whispers. Stories about men who crossed the wrong person. About guards who looked the other way. About moments when survival required becoming someone you never imagined you could be. And the deeper you go into Angola's history, the clearer it becomes that this prison didn't become deadly by accident. It was built this way. By the time darkness settles over Angola, the prison feels smaller. The land that looked endless during the day tightens into corridors, tiers, and rooms where men are forced closer together than they ever want to be. This is when reputations matter most. This is when past actions catch up. And this is when the rules that aren't written down become deadly clear. Inside Angola, survival depends on understanding one truth early: the prison remembers everything. Every slight. Every debt. Every moment of weakness. Nothing disappears here. It only waits. New inmates often arrive thinking violence is random. It isn't. At Angola, violence is targeted. It follows a logic shaped by race, sentence length, alliances, and history. Men serving short sentences keep their heads down, hoping to pass through unnoticed. Men serving life sentences move differently. With no parole to fear and nothing left to protect on the outside, some adopt a mindset that makes Angola more dangerous than any weapon ever could. There are men here who have already accepted death as inevitable. And when a man reaches that point, rules lose meaning. Gangs exist inside Angola, but not always in the way outsiders imagine. Some are formal, tied to national or regional organizations. Others are loose networks based on race, neighborhood, or shared enemies. Many inmates aren't officially in anything, yet still owe loyalty to someone stronger. Protection often comes at a price. Sometimes that price is money from the outside. Sometimes it's labor. Sometimes it's silence. And sometimes it's violence carried out on someone else's behalf. Refusing a demand can mark you. Accepting one can trap you deeper than any cell ever could. Correctional officers understand these dynamics, even when they don't openly acknowledge them. Angola has long operated under a philosophy of containment rather than prevention. As long as violence stays within certain boundaries, the system absorbs it. This creates a dangerous balance. Guards intervene when chaos threatens control, but many smaller conflicts are allowed to resolve themselves. The result is an environment where inmates often police each other, enforcing rules more brutally than staff ever could. And when something goes wrong, really wrong, the consequences ripple far beyond the moment itself. There are incidents at Angola that inmates still talk about years later. Attacks so sudden and severe they reshaped entire housing units. Fights that began over trivial matters and ended with irreversible outcomes. In some cases, violence serves as a warning. In others, it's revenge long delayed. What makes Angola especially dangerous is how little it takes for that switch to flip. A look held too long. A rumor repeated. A debt unpaid. And once violence starts, it rarely stays contained. Parole, emergency response lights reflecting off concrete walls at night. When serious incidents occur, lockdowns follow. Entire sections of the prison freeze. Meals are delayed. Movement stops. Men remain locked in place, listening to fragments of information travel through vents and doors. Who was hurt? Was it fatal? Is retaliation coming? These unanswered questions create their own kind of fear. Not panic, something quieter and more corrosive. Because every inmate knows lockdowns end eventually. And when they do, the balance of power inside may have shifted. The morning after a violent incident is often worse than the event itself. Tension hangs in the air. Men scan each other differently. Conversations drop to whispers. Some inmates suddenly request transfers or protective custody. Others prepare for what they believe is inevitable. Protective custody at Angola is a last resort. It offers safety from immediate threats, but at the cost of isolation and stigma. Once labeled as someone who couldn't handle general population, returning becomes almost impossible. And isolation has its own dangers. Men placed in long-term isolation describe it as a war against the mind. With little stimulation, thoughts spiral. Regret sharpens. Anger deepens. Some emerge more controlled. Others come back unpredictable, carrying a psychological edge that makes future violence more likely, not less. Angola's system doesn't just contain violence. In many ways, it recycles it. Daytime labor remains a constant, regardless of what happens the night before. The fields don't stop. The assignments don't change. Angola expects productivity even from men processing trauma, grief, or fear. Some inmates find stability in routine. Others feel crushed by it. For lifers, the repetition becomes a reminder that every day will look almost exactly like the last, until the end. And that end is closer for some than anyone realizes. Healthcare at Angola is functional, but strained. Chronic illness is common among aging inmates. Long sentences mean men grow old behind bars, dealing with conditions that were never part of their original sentence. Violence leaves its own medical scars. Some are treated quickly. Others linger untreated, either because inmates fear retaliation for reporting injuries or because the system prioritizes order over recovery. And when medical issues turn fatal, Angola absorbs the loss with efficiency that feels unsettling. There are no public memorials here. No headlines. No long moments of reflection. A body is moved. A name is recorded. A space in the cemetery is filled. Life inside continues. But among inmates, deaths leave marks. Sometimes they harden lines between groups. Sometimes they serve as cautionary tales. Sometimes they push men toward religion, art, or introspection as a way to cope with the knowledge that this place ends stories quietly. Art programs exist at Angola, offering rare opportunities for expression. Paintings, drawings, and music become outlets for emotions that have nowhere else to go. For some, creativity provides structure. For others, it's the only way to process decades of confinement. Yet even here, the environment intrudes. Supplies are limited. Access is controlled. And participation depends on behavior, reinforcing the idea that peace must be earned. Angola is known for hosting one of the most unusual prison events in America, a public rodeo. On certain days, inmates perform for crowds from the outside world. For a brief moment, Angola opens its gates, not to release men, but to display them. Supporters call it rehabilitation and opportunity. Critics see exploitation. For inmates, it's complicated. The rodeo offers rare interaction with the outside, a chance to earn money, and a break from routine. But it also reinforces a truth Angola never hides for long: freedom is something to be observed, not experienced. When the crowds leave, the gates close. The silence returns. As years pass, Angola changes men in ways that can't be undone. Some become institutionalized, unable to imagine life beyond strict routines. Others grow increasingly volatile, worn down by decades of confinement. And then there are those who attempt transformation. Education programs allow a small number of inmates to earn degrees. Faith initiatives train inmate ministers. Peer counseling offers limited support. These efforts produce real change for some, but they exist within a system that still defines people primarily by their worst act. Redemption at Angola is possible. Escape from Angola is not. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of Angola is time itself. Without release dates, years lose shape. Birthdays blur. Decades disappear. Men watch younger inmates arrive and grow old themselves, all within the same walls. This warps perspective. Long-term planning becomes meaningless. Impulse control erodes. Violence becomes easier to justify when the future holds nothing new. And this is where Angola's deadliest reputation truly takes root, not just in bloodshed, but in the slow erosion of hope. By the time most men inside Angola reach old age, violence is no longer the threat they fear most. Time is. Many of the men who once controlled tears, enforced rules, and inspired fear now move slowly, leaning on canes, struggling to breathe, waiting for medication calls that mark the rhythm of their days. The same prison that rewarded strength and brutality shows no mercy to weakness or age. Angola does not release men because they've changed. It releases them only when the body gives up. Some of these men committed their crimes decades ago. The world they remember no longer exists. Families are gone. Neighborhoods erased. Even the language outside the gates has changed. Angola has become their entire reality. For them, survival is no longer about dominance. It's about endurance. But even in this stage, the prison never fully loosens its grip. Medical care comes with delays. Movement is limited. Privacy disappears completely. Death, when it arrives, is procedural. No ceremony. No forgiveness. Just another number removed from the count. Every death inside Angola reinforces a truth the prison was built around: this is a place designed for permanence. Rehabilitation exists at the margins. Redemption exists in theory. But the structure itself was never meant to prepare men for life beyond the fence. It was meant to hold them until life ends. And that design shapes every decision, every policy, every moment of violence that has occurred here over generations. The cemetery is Angola's final proof. Rows of markers. Some with names. Many without. Men who entered young and left only when their bodies failed. Their stories rarely make it beyond these fields. Yet Angola continues. New inmates arrive. Old ones fade away. The cycle never stops. And that may be the most disturbing reality of all. Because Angola is not just a prison with a violent past. It is a system that learned how to survive violence by normalizing it. Inside these fences, danger isn't constant chaos. It's patience. It's hierarchy. It's time doing its work slowly and completely. Angola doesn't need to be loud to be deadly. It simply waits. Angola stands as a reminder of what happens when punishment replaces purpose, and when a place is built to hold people forever. Long after the gates close each night, its legacy continues, not just in violence, but in the quiet certainty that for many inside, this is where life ends. And once you understand that, the silence makes sense.